Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot, the show where we turn the camera around, take a look at the stupidity of the press. It's always fun. Look, I could go on with a preamble, but let's just cut right to the chase, shall we? This week, on Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris announced that she has a running mate for vice president in the coming election. His name is Tim Walz, the governor out of Minnesota. And immediately the world went gaga. The Trump administration, the former Trumpsters, they all went nuts. And the Democrats tried to defend it in the press. Well, once again, we didn't know what was going on. And never will you see more fun than watching the press melt down. Anyway, finally on Wednesday, I think a reporter asked a question about misinformation on Tim Walz's military record. This was stupid too. Facts in this question were completely forgotten. And I was left thinking, why didn't the White House merely say, we don't respond to fiction? Come up with a better question. I want to hear that just once in the White House press briefing room. And that brings us to this week's interview. Full disclosure, Rebecca Aguilar and I once competed against each other in San Antonio on the crime beat. She's a great reporter, 7-time Emmy award-winning reporter in television. She's an activist for reporters' rights. She's the former president of the National Society of Professional Journalists and the former vice president for the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. She's got a lot of interesting things to say about mentoring reporters, which is important, and the dangers of agents and consultants in the news business that only cares about money. Take a watch. Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot. Boy, it's a joy to have with me today an old friend, an old colleague, and an old competitor. So no, we're not old. It's just we were been around for a while.
We're vintage.
She's a former president of SPJ, a 7-time Emmy Award winner, and also former VP of NAHJ. Right, Rebecca?
Right.
Rebecca
Exactly.
Aguilar joins us, and Rebecca, I want to start out this conversation with something you and I are aware of because we do have a little bit of experience. The changes in the media over the last 40 years for me have been just immeasurable. It's not the same business I got into. And I know you feel the same way. So I'd like to start by exploring, what do you think's different about today? What's changed for the worse? Let's go there.
I think, when you and I started decades ago, there was that format where you start in a smaller city, go to the next one and the next one. And not that we didn't want to work in a bigger city, but we lacked the experience. We still needed to know how to storytell, how to confront bullies, politicians, people with money. We also needed to learn office politics because there's office politics go along the way. And there's just a lot to learn when you go from, let's say I started in Toledo, right? Then I went to Chicago as a writer where I noticed things are different. And then I went to, Corpus, San Antonio, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and here in Dallas. So I learned along the way. I grew up. I knew how to deal with bullies in the newsroom and outside the newsroom. And along the way, I also learned how to deal with people with power because they too can think they can intimidate you. Today, and a perfect example is my son. He graduated from the University of North Texas, got a internship at CBS 11 in Dallas. And within the year, he got hired as like a writer, an associate producer. The good thing about him is he grew up in a news family. So it's different. He hears it. He knows it. But let's say it's another person. A lot of people are being hired straight out of college. They're throwing the bone. Hey, you can work in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Diego.
The White House.
Right. Wow, really? The White House?
Straight out of college.
And they know nothing. I mean, they do know book knowledge, which is important. They knew college campus, radio station, newspaper, but the real world can be a barracuda. And that's what they don't realize. And the unfortunate thing is because they have not gained the experience of being knocked down, get up from the smaller, medium to large markets, right? They burn out, they quit, they're mistreated by others in the media. I mean, I hear it all the time.
We see it. Well, here's my question for you. You bring up a couple of really good points. First of all, we were able to make a lot of our mistakes in the smaller markets, right? And learn from it. Now you're thrown into the, like the White House, you're thrown into it, and you become part of the problem because you're so afraid of making a mistake. You follow along, you follow power instead of calling power into question. You follow along with it. But more importantly, what I see today, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but when you and I remember we competed in
San
San
Antonio.
Antonio. But whenever we went after a story, what did we have to have? We had to have vetted facts. We could not go on the air and say, well, we think this or we think that, or my opinion is this, my opinion is that. Today, younger reporters are giving me their opinions and not the facts. And that to me is a huge change.
And I think that goes back to college. I mean, come on. They're being, in college, a professor needs to tell them, okay, number one, learn the SPJ Code of Ethics. Okay, these are our guidelines, right? These are our guidelines. What do they say? Seek truth and report it. Minimize harm. Act independently. Be accountable and transparent. All these things. These are 4 different things with different guidelines. By the way, these keep you out of lawsuits. I've never been sued.
Yeah, nor have I.
Right? But the thing is, it starts in college. When they start saying, gosh, let's say for me, the daughter of undocumented workers, right, turned permanent, residents. I grew up with they were civil rights, migrant rights. I picked tomatoes as a child. Sure, when I hear the former president call Mexicans rapists and whatever else, right, or there were lowlifes, or look at all these people taking Black jobs, Latino jobs. I mean, I don't see anybody trying to pick tomatoes in 100-degree temperatures, Mr. Trump, right?
You're right.
I know from those situations that even though when I interview him, I still have to be fair to the man, right? That's my job, unless I'm an opinion writer or a commentator, 2 different things.
Right. And you clearly label it as commentary or opinion.
Clearly. But what happens, I think, in colleges is I don't think they're set straight. And once they come out, let me tell you this, Brian. I, a year ago, started something called #CallingAllJournalists Initiative. What I realized from being in different groups of journalists, veterans to rookies on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, is that some of these young people, they're dying for guidance.
Yes.
They're dying for guidance because, like you said, they go straight from college to the White House. And there may be someone like you that says, hey, you know what? You need to do this, this, and this. I'm just trying to help you out. On the other hand, they may run into people like, I ain't helping her. I mean, why should I? They're my competition. Instead of having that, because I know you've always been a mentor to young people. No matter if they're competing against you, when they're struggling. It's better to help them than to say, okay,
I've had them ask me that. And, it's funny, you go from new guy on the block to mentor, it seems like overnight, but I'm still 19. So, hey, but the thing that I've noticed, you're right, is that there are those that are dying for it, but we've constructed a business that there are no mentors. I've had reporters come up to me and go, hey, this is a great story. This is what I think. And I go, I don't give a damn what you think. I barely care what I think. What do you know? Go out and get the facts. And so when they come into the White House and they go this, that, and the other thing, I go, well, wait a minute, that's really fine. But there are people that are afraid to walk into upper press at the White House and talk to the press.
I find that shocking. I mean, seriously, I did not know that they're showing up with no experience to the White House. None.
They cut.
Are we talking, and just for your audience and the listeners too, are we talking about like are they going from small publications, major,
I know of reporters that have come straight out of college, maybe have a master's, but start at the White House and with no practical experience as a reporter, none as a beat reporter. You and I worked a beat. We worked the crime beat. So we knew how to work sources. We knew how to we knew when people were bullshitting us because we dealt with them on a daily basis. We knew that those are the things that they don't have anymore is a well-established beat system and bringing, they throw you into the White House beat. Yeah, that's a beat, but they don't, since you've never worked a beat before and it is the White House, that power is overpowering for some of the younger reporters. They go, wow, I've got to listen to what they have to say. They're important. I want to be important too. And so the pool reporters get all the attention. And some of them have zero to none experience. There are some experienced reporters. There are a handful of them. But, I remember the first day I walked into the White House press briefing room, I was introduced to, and this is before I even got to San Antonio. I was introduced to Helen Thomas and Sam Donaldson. And
Are you good friends with Sam Donaldson?
yeah, Sam was one of my mentors. He's still a good friend. I love him to death. And Sam, I remember Helen said, she introduced me to Sam. Sam said, Brian, you take a look at that first row here in the briefing room. There's probably 200 years of experience. You listen to every one of those people. And then he looked at Helen and said, and Helen's got 190 years of that experience. And she made some smart ass comment to him. He made some smart ass comment to her. And I was like, we're off. This is great. But you look at the experience level in that briefing room now in that first row, there's not half that in among those 7 people sitting there. Yeah. So that's a problem.
I think that I've seen some of them. I mean, obviously, as a woman of color, I've noticed the diversity, and sometimes as
that's
people
good to see.
Right. Sometimes as people of color, we don't get that experience, but I do know that I've seen the front row, and the front row changes a lot. I do see a lot of women. I do see a lot of very competent people. I mean, there are some people that I cringe when when you know that the press secretary or one of these important people, they're taking over, and you would just want to say, stop.
Yeah. And
I've seen veterans that I know personally who've gotten out of control, and you want to say, excuse me, but now it's time. I understand this press person is going around circles on you and giving you this and that.
But one thing we don't do.
Right, but you also have to stop yourself from being rude and berating. I mean, I recently saw someone and I thought, I just wanted to tell him, you're on national TV. Have some professionalism.
It's how you ask that question. What we don't do, which leads to that, is that we used to follow each other up a lot. Like if a question came and they didn't answer and the next person got a question, they go, I'd like to circle back to what you was just asked. We don't listen to each other a whole lot. And that comes from experience. So sometimes we miss the opportunity to double down. But to your point, there was one that was asked the other day and some of them are so self-serving, some of these questions, and some of them have a political agenda.
But is it self-serving? Excuse me. Is it self-serving, or is it because, let's remember, I mean, I remember you at that press conference when you asked, I think, President Bush a question, and it was like, what? Is it self-serving? And I'm not saying that you were doing out of an ego trip, okay? But is it self-serving, or is it because everybody wants to show their boss, I can ask the tough question? That could be one. Number 2, I do want my viral moment. That's today. Back in our day, we didn't have viral moments, right? Or number 3, you're trying to establish to that person that you're interviewing that, hey, you know what? I may be sitting next to Brian Karem with 40 years experience, and I may only have 8 years experience or maybe 5, but take me seriously as much as you do. So I think
that all of those are part of it. I also think part of it is that they group source questions to ask, and they don't listen to the answers.
What do you mean group source? They're sent questions asked by producers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And the one I was going to give as an example was, the arrest of a Pakistani man for, wanting to, and it happened, yesterday, 2 days ago, where they had this person that was arrested and charged with, wanting to kill people, including Donald Trump. The DOJ arrested him. And the question in the briefing room, you and I no one would have asked this question back in the day. Do you condemn the actions or condone the actions? And I'm going, why would we ask that question in the briefing room? That's not a question that you would ask. That's not a question we would ever ask in the briefing room back in the day, because arresting someone and charging them with a crime is the deepest form of condemnation that you could have. You and I would go, all right, they already condemned him. Well, why am I going to spend 5 minutes of time on that when, of course, we could be talking about other issues that are far more important? So I think it's the nuance that is lacking in the briefing room, and the nuance between being a hard charger. Like Sam said, he goes, I'm far less concerned about rude reporters than I am about those who are disinclined to ask a hard question. And we get a lot of that today.
I think sometimes some of these reporters And I don't know what it's like in the White House. I have only entered that room twice. And it's so small, it would make me feel claustrophobic.
It is claustrophobic. Thank you. People go, it's huge. I go, no, it's
I would
not.
think, gosh, somebody with body odor, I'd want to not sit by them. But
that's a different issue, and you've named it.
Right. But I think the thing is first of all, I don't know if it's protocol. I don't know, if the front row always gets the answers, because it just seems like suddenly, and I'm glad that, finally people said you in the back, because people get lost, right? But I think that sometimes some reporters, and I don't know at what experience level or personality, you and I are in faces. Some people I've seen reporters that they lay back, and sometimes they get an exclusive because they're like, oh, that Rebecca, that Brian, they're all over. Let's talk to this person, right? Not because they can think they can manipulate it, but the reporter's smart. They figure they don't want these in-your-face reporters. They want someone.
They'll talk to me. That's a good tactic. I like that tactic.
So maybe what these reporters do is, oh yeah, let Brian ask all the questions. Let Rebecca, and then I can approach later, if I can, the press secretary and go, I was trying to get in a word. Brian was talking too much, but blah blah blah. I mean,
that's a great tactic. I love that. Yeah. We don't see that much either. That's a good cop, bad cop. I love that. I've been both of those. I'm usually better at bad cop.
I just, one of the things that I recall you and Acosta, would always, I know that you guys didn't work together, but it just seemed like you were very good during the Trump days. And I will give you kudos for this, that when, what's her name, Sarah with the pearls?
Yeah. Sarah Sanders.
Yeah. I remember when she'd be up there and she would be fabricating information, right? And you're like, excuse me, press secretary, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, let's go back. Or you would see one of the other reporters that she would immediately, lie in their faces. And something that I want to talk to you about later, remind me about lies. And you would go, excuse me, I just want to follow up on what, Jim Acosta asked, blah, 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 like to get an answer.
Yeah.
And so I think I appreciate that because, you're right. Everybody wants their viral moment. Everybody wants to be able to say on the news, I asked. No, it's we. You're there with a photographer.
Yes.
Right? But I think what you did well was that you were very strong in their face, very to the point, but you didn't, let them make you curl up to the corner.
No, Jim was great about that. Jim's a buddy, and I know you know him, and you guys are friends. And Jim and I often talk about that kind of stuff back in the. But here's the thing: I also wanted to. One of the ways I think this has happened, that we've got to this point, like in the briefing room and in reporting, is that there's been just a consolidation of media over the last 40 years, companies buying each other out. 6 corporations own 90% of what we see, read, or hear. And I don't see that they're committed to diversity. It was Ben Bagdickian who said, from the Washington Post, who said, if you want true diversity, that includes diversity of ownership. And we don't have that. What we have are 6 companies, and most of the people sitting on those boards of those 6 companies do not look like me or you. And so I find that that's a huge problem in our business. And so those that they hire are more willing. We had hinted at it earlier. You talked about it earlier, kind of kowtowing to the corporate line. How big of a problem do you find the lack of ownership and the consolidation? How is that? I mean, you put out a sheet, and a help wanted sheet, and there are just. Look, there's twice the number of people on the planet as when you and I were born, and a quarter of the number of reporters. The reporting pool just gets smaller and smaller. So I find this to be a huge problem, but I'd love your thoughts on it.
I think there's a big problem. I heard yesterday a commentator on CNN talk about, well, when you're Fox and Sinclair, and I'm thinking, wow, Sinclair, he put them in the group, pretty much claiming, there's a lot of claims that companies like Sinclair or Nexstar are becoming, Fox News wannabes in a very slight manner, right? And so, there's that part. When you have certain companies following certain format, there's companies like Fox News, Newsmax. What was that? The other one, it got thrown off my cable. I forgot. OAN. Yeah, whatever.
That's
right.
Well,
right?
there's a
So,
story there, but go ahead.
right, but it's all very right wing, and they own it. Okay, and then there's people, I think, companies that claim they're in the middle, but in certain places, they may own 100 or 200 TV stations, and in
Yeah,
certain places they have a a narrative they're going to follow on the down low, right? I
right.
mean, I worked at a Fox station, okay, in Dallas for 14 years. There were judges that would go, "I'm not talking to you," and I was like, "Well, why not? You're Fox." I'm like, "All right, let's talk." And I would say, "Look, my company is owned by Fox, but we don't follow their narrative. We're just a Fox owned station," which was true. I
Yeah,
will,
I
I
worked for a
will,
Fox owned station in Kansas City. You're right.
right.
That's
and,
true.
and,
We did
and,
the
and
same
I
thing.
will give credit to my bosses. They were not like conservative, right wing, Republican puppets. They weren't. And so many times, and I don't know if you ran into, there were judges, cops, or I'm not talking to you, you're Fox News. And it
Yeah,
was like, and I had to talk to him about it. And I think that's the same thing that's happening now. There's those companies, as you say, the Sinclairs, the Nexstar, the Scripps, the Cox, the Graham,
yeah.
the Gray, they're all owned.
iHeartRadio, all this group that owns what 400 newspapers and have closed them all down. Remember, you and I, when we were competing in San Antonio, there was the Express News and the Light. I mean, there were 5 or 6 and plus radio stations. And when we went out to cover a crime story, man, you had to be on your toes, or
Right.
you have Kid Death over at the, as we called him, over at the Express News, Tom Edwards. He's going to beat your butt on a story.
I
You
forgot
know,
about him. You're right.
yeah, Gary Martin, who's no longer with us, a good buddy at the Light, he beat you on a story. You'd beat me on a story. I'd have to be on my toes to make sure that I got the stuff. There's no competition today for that. In some
Yeah, but,
places,
but, but I got to take that back a little bit because I am in different groups, right? Everything
right.
since I started the initiative, every Sunday I try to talk to at least 4 young people, and they really have a passion, Brian. They have
I
a
I
passion.
love the passion.
They do have the passion, but they just need, and I tell them all, find a mentor, find someone that you want to be like. Find someone that really thinks journalism, not being an influencer or dancing on TikTok and all that.
Exactly.
I'm not throwing shade at those people. Some of those are people real good dancers and whatever, but I'm in the business of journalism. I'm not here in the business of showing you how do I put on my makeup or how I dance. That's not me. My passion is journalism. And so while we have those companies, and it is scary, the beauty of it is within them. It's like,
There
it's
are
like,
kids who want to do right,
yes. And
but there's so few opportunities for them compared to when you and I were coming up, is what
yeah,
I
but
think.
sometimes you create your opportunities.
That's true.
Sometimes you create your opportunities.
So
I
you're
know,
hopeful.
yes, I know young people that I've said, they're out of college and how do I break into TV? And I'm like, go find a story, shoot it with your phone. The beauty of them now is these phones, right? You can show the whole package and cut a package in there and then boom, put it out, right? Um,
Yeah,
and
remember when you and I had to walk around with this camera guy, sound guy, the umbilical cord, 50 pounds or this, a
the
big
tape,
camera like that.
remember people always like, what? What were those big tapes? I'm like, yes, they
Yeah,
were
the
heavy.
3/4 decks and the and then to shoot a stand up, what you
I
had
think
to have.
I think the great thing is if there's these companies and the majority of these companies, yeah, are run, in my opinion, by a lot of white men. I look as I analyze their finances, what they do for a living, who they rub shoulders with. A lot of them can be Republicans, right? I mean, I noticed that. If you look at any of these owners, a lot of them, maybe other than the one that owns Allen Media, a lot of them seemed conservative. They probably give a lot to the Republican Party. Um, you know, but the beauty is while the generals and the lieutenants may be following a narrative, whether let's be liberal or let's be conservative, the army within the army, which is us and the young people, many of them deciding, I'm either going to push forward and you're not going to tell me how to have a certain narrative, how to make it more conservative. I mean, there's a company right now, okay? And I'm not going to, no, I'll just say it, Scripps. Um, they have a mantra in the morning. And now I'm not, I've heard from at least 25 people who work for this company. They have a mantra, and I wish I could read it to you, but basically, and they've sent it to me. where in the morning they'll go, okay, um, you know, Brian, I need you to read this. And they have a mantra. Gosh, I wish I could find it right now. And they have to say it. They're like, something about the company, this or that. Gosh, I wish I could find it. But they have to, it's like saying, today we strive for professional. I'm just making it up, but I know that
Yeah.
scripts is one because it's been sent to me by at least 20, 25 people, because I wanted to see
Yep.
from different companies. And they're like, yes, some of them, and again, great managers. I'm not saying
you're going back to the Ben Bagdickian thing. There, Bagdickian, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Ben Bagdickian at the Washington Post said, ultimately, at the end of the day, your allegiance is not to your owners. Your allegiance is not to yourself. Your allegiance isn't to your managers. Your allegiance is to your audience to provide them the proper vetted information. And
exactly.
that to me is where, so as we close, let me ask you this. If you could do one thing to change.
But let me jump back real quick.
Okay.
I just want to say this, that there are veterans like you and I who care about this younger generation, and we're going to help them survive.
Care about journalism.
Right. And those who watch this, if you're a young person or even an older person, because here's another thing too. Someone yesterday messaged me who works in DC, by the way, and he said, it's going to be harder for me to get, job because I'm in my 60s. I was like, no, 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 no. Look, I'm 66. I get job offers all the time, because you put yourself out there, because people know that you're good. For younger people, I say, look, you know what? The beauty is, and this I learned from my son. I remember him telling you spent 14 years in that Fox station and they ended up firing you. My generation, we don't put up with it. We're like, you want to mistreat us? Bye-bye, we're leaving. Yeah. And that's what we do. And that's the beauty of today's generation. They decide, you know what? You're going to treat me like shit, excuse my language. Then you know what? I'm going out the door because I'm nobody's slave. And so kudos to them for that bravery. For those who don't do that, follow them, right? But I think that you and I will, and many other journalists, because I know many people with our experience, that will help people survive this business. Because sooner or later, those generals and those lieutenants, they're thrown out to pasture too.
Yeah, that's true. So as we close, if you had the magic wand to wave and you could do one thing to cure the ills of journalism today, what would you want to do first? What would you want to do more than anything else?
I think in television news, I would get rid of the MMJ, MSJ out in the field, that these reporters that have to shoot and edit everything. I think it's always good to have a photographer or a reporter with you, because extra eyes and ears for safety, especially today with the protests or natural disasters. I don't think profits over people is important. And I wish that some of these bosses that I could throw their asses out there and say, you shoot a story by yourself in 110 degrees in the middle of a protest, you shoot it. And then do social media. Tell me, when can you, I've had people tell me they don't even have time to take a piss. Okay.
Yeah.
First thing I would get rid of. Number two, I would get rid of consultants, because all they consult is nothing. They haven't been in the business forever. Right. They're telling people how to do the job when
That's
they
a good point.
Have not been in the business. Number three, in TV news, I'd get rid of agents because they're vultures. They make money off people. Number four, I would make people, everybody. When you walk in my newsroom, hey, Brian, we have a new person. You're going to be mentoring that person for the next 2 months. Teach them, they're going to be following you, whatever. Mentors are important. Number five, I would get rid of all these labels. There's so many labels, accountability, solutions, whatever. Everything's journalism. Let's just do journalism.
Vetted facts, baby. That's the coin of the realm. That's exactly.
And I think the last thing is, let's admit when a lie is a lie. Stop calling falsehoods, misinterpretations, misinformation, disinformation. A lie is a lie. When someone like the former president lies, just say it. The other day, I heard someone on CNN, I don't know, do we call it miswords? Do we call it?
No, we call it a lie. That's
And the last thing, review the SPJ Code of Ethics. I know I'm their former president, but I seriously think this is a guide to show you how you really do it. And that's the way it is. And you won't be sued. You'll always have a job. And more than anything, you will have your reputation.
Yeah,
you're
God bless.
Yeah.
Oh, Rebecca, you were great. The consultant part and the agent part. Oh, mazel tov. It was beautiful. I love it. Listen, thanks for joining us. I love to have you back. We do this
Anytime.
weekly to talk about, and then on my other podcast, I'd love to, we'll talk later. But anyway, I want to thank you for joining us. This is Reverse Shot, and we will catch you next time. So that's it for this episode of Reverse Shot. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Karem. Look, if you have questions and you want some answers, you can reach us at justaskthequestionpodcast@gmail.com. That's justaskthequestionpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. Next week, we'll answer some of the questions we've gotten already and any others that you may have. And we'll continue to update you on the problems and the promises in the press. Once again, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time on the Mary Trump Media Network.